to uncover what I had avoided seeing all my life.
Which was?
Boy, that's memories that would drop you bone by bone, you know, that would just floor you.
How do you survive a life where your protector is actually your predator, where your greatest love story is secretly your biggest trauma, and where your mother's death happens on the one day you're supposed to celebrate your birth? This is the silent tragedy of Sally Field. From a back alley clinic in Tijuana to a plane crash that nearly took everything, Sally didn't just make it in Hollywood, she survived it. Tonight, we're looking past the awards and the applause to reveal the haunting truth of a woman who became an expert at hiding until she couldn't hide anymore. America thought they knew her, the bubbly girl next door, the sunshine in human form, the star of Gidget, and later the flying nun, basically the patron saint of wholesome television. But behind that glowing, camera-ready smile, something was rotting, quietly, patiently. Well, it started early, too early. After her parents split, her mother married Jock Mahoney, a man who looked like he walked straight out of a casting call for charming hero. Tall, charismatic, a literal Tarzan figure, the kind of man you'd trust instantly, which, as it turns out, was the problem. Because inside that house, the script flipped. Young Sally, still figuring out what safety even meant, was pulled into a dynamic so twisted it didn't even register as abuse at first. That's how manipulation works. It doesn't announce itself, it whispers, it confuses, it makes the victim question reality itself. He wasn't always cruel. That's the part that sticks. He could be warm, playful, magnetic, the Pied Piper of the family. And that duality? That's what shattered her sense of truth. Because how do you reconcile kindness with violation? Oh, how does a child process affection that comes wrapped in fear? She couldn't, so she didn't. Instead, she internalized it, buried it, turned it into something else. Performance, perfection, a need to be liked, adored, needed, because somewhere deep down, approval had become survival. And here's the part that lingers like a ghost. She didn't even tell her mother. Not then. Not for years. Because when your reality is warped that young, silence doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like the only language you have. So, while the world saw a rising star, she was already learning how to act long before the cameras ever rolled. Fast forward, she's 17, barely out of childhood, and suddenly pregnant. Not a scandal, not yet, just a terrified teenager standing on the edge of a decision that, at the time, it wasn't even legally hers to make. Because this is pre-Roe v. Wade America. There are no safe options, no open conversations, just whispers, backdoors, and consequences. So, what happens? The same man who distorted her childhood steps back into the frame. Jock Mahoney arranges everything, quietly, efficiently, almost clinically. A trip to Tijuana, a clinic that isn't really a clinic, a procedure that isn't really care. And just like that, she's in a situation no teenager should ever face. There's no anesthesia worth mentioning, no comfort, no dignity, just pain, confusion, and then, because apparently the universe wasn't done, violation layered on top of violation, a technician who crosses lines that should never be crossed. It's not just physical, it's psychological annihilation. And when it's over, there's no recovery period, no therapy, no acknowledgement. She's rushed out like nothing happened, like she didn't just experience something that would echo through the rest of her life. Because in that era, silence wasn't just expected, it was enforced. And she carried it for decades. Imagine that, building a career, standing in front of millions, smiling, laughing, delivering lines with perfect timing, while holding on to a memory that feels like it's burning a hole through your identity. That's not resilience, that's survival on autopilot. And the wildest part? The world had no idea, not a clue. While she was becoming a star, she was also becoming an expert at hiding. Then comes the love story, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. Enter Burt Reynolds, charismatic, magnetic, but the definition of a Hollywood leading leading man. Their chemistry? Explosive. Especially in Smokey and the Bandit, where audiences didn't just watch them, they believed them. It was electric. It was iconic. It was a setup. Because behind the scenes, something felt eerily familiar. He was charming. At first, of course he was. That's how these stories always begin. But then came the control, the subtle shifts, the comments that weren't quite jokes, the expectations that felt less like love and more like ownership. He didn't just want a partner. He wanted influence over what she said, what she wore, how she existed. And for someone whose understanding of love had already been distorted, it didn't immediately register as wrong. It felt recognizable. That's the tragedy. So she later described the relationship as confusing and complicated, which translated means it hurt, but not in a way she could easily explain, because it wasn't all bad. There were real feelings there, real moments of connection, and that's what makes it so difficult to walk away. Toxicity wrapped in affection is the hardest thing to escape. There were signs, jealousy that escalated too quickly, tension that snapped without warning, moments where control became physical, subtle but unmistakable. And yet, from the outside, they were Hollywood's golden couple. That contrast between public fantasy and private reality is where the real damage happens. Because when everyone around you is celebrating something that's quietly breaking you, it traps you even deeper. By the time it ended, the emotional imprint was already there. And not just from him, but from everything that came before. It wasn't just a failed relationship. It was a pattern repeating itself. And the worst part? She knew it. By the time the cameras were rolling and the awards started stacking, Sally Field had already mastered the most dangerous skill in Hollywood, looking fine when everything is absolutely not fine. Because while audiences were watching her float across screens in The Flying Nun, literally defying gravity with a smile that could sell breakfast cereal, she was privately sinking, hard, fast, quietly. This wasn't just stress. This was a full-body rebellion, a mind trying to process years of buried trauma while being told, hit your mark, say your lines, be adorable. So she did what many do when control feels impossible. She tried to control the only thing she could, her body. All food became the battlefield, not in some dramatic cinematic way. No, this was messier, more desperate. Late-night cycles of binging followed by attempts to undo it. Except even that wouldn't cooperate. She wrote about trying to force herself to purge and failing again and again, trapped between impulse and inability. Imagine that frustration, wanting release, wanting control, and your own body just refuses. So the cycle continues. Smile on set, spiral in private, repeat. And the cruelest irony? She was playing characters built on purity and perfection while feeling anything but. The disconnect was almost theatrical, a performance within a performance. A woman acting like a woman who had it all together, but the cracks were there. Depression crept in during her late teens. Like a slow leak no one noticed because the house still looked intact. She was functioning, working, delivering, which in Hollywood is all that matters until it isn't. Then life throws in something extra because apparently emotional turmoil wasn't enough. Years later, she's on a private plane with her family, husband, baby, a quiet moment mid-air, and then chaos. The aircraft loses control during takeoff, collides, fuel everywhere. The kind of situation that turns seconds into lifetimes. And in that moment, no career, no image, no legacy, just instinct. Hold the baby. That's it. That's the only thought that survives. Everything else, gone. They make it out, somehow. Bruised, shaken, but alive. A miracle, technically, but survival like that doesn't come free. It leaves residue. The kind that shows up later, uninvited, all in the form of what if? What if it had exploded? What if she hadn't made it? What if that was the end? So now, add that to the list. Trauma layered on trauma, wrapped in a career that demands constant emotional output. And still, she showed up. That's the part people don't talk about enough. Not the awards, not the applause, but the sheer exhaustion of holding it all together when everything inside is quietly asking you not to. If there was one person she orbited around, one emotional anchor in a life that often felt like it was drifting. It was her mother, Margaret Field. Complicated doesn't even begin to cover it, because this wasn't a clean, comforting relationship. It was layered, tangled, built on love, yes, but also silence. The kind of silence that grows heavier with time. And for years, Sally never told her the full truth about what happened with Jock Mahoney. Not the extent, not the duration, not the impact. Because how do you drop that kind of truth into a relationship that's already carrying so much? You don't. Until you have to. And that moment came late, painfully late. Her mother was dying. Cancer, the slow kind, the kind that gives you time, but not enough of it. 6 years of caregiving, of watching someone fade while trying to hold on to whatever pieces are left. And somewhere in that window, the truth finally surfaces. Not dramatically, not with cinematic closure, just quietly. He knew, she suspected, but she believed his version, that it was minimal, a one-time thing, something containable. It wasn't. So Sally tells her the real version, the years, the confusion, the damage. Out and what happens? No grand resolution, no long conversations, no emotional unpacking, just silence again. But this time, it's heavier, because now both of them know. And then, almost like a final twist of the knife, her mother dies. On Sally's birthday. Same day. Think about that. The one day that's supposed to be yours becomes permanently tied to loss. Every year after that, it's not just cake and candles. It's memory. It's grief. It's that conversation that came too late. That's not poetic. That's brutal. And for someone already carrying decades of unresolved emotion, it's the kind of moment that doesn't just hurt. It reshapes how you experience time itself. Birthdays aren't celebrations anymore. They're echoes. Now she's 79. And on paper, it looks peaceful. 3 sons, all grandchildren, a career that most actors would sell their souls for, awards, legacy, respect, the full package. But here's where the story takes its final, almost unsettling turn. Because after everything, after the fame, the relationships, the survival, Sally Field didn't become louder. She became quieter. Not in a mysterious, glamorous way. Not in a Hollywood legend retreats into luxury kind of narrative. No, this is different. This is retreat, selective presence, limited appearances, a life that's carefully, almost cautiously curated to avoid unnecessary noise. Because when you've spent decades navigating chaos, external and internal, the silence starts to feel like safety. Even her longtime friend, Jane Fonda, has hinted at it, that Sally doesn't go out much, that she has to be coaxed, encouraged, pulled gently into social spaces she once dominated effortlessly. And it's not because she can, it's because she doesn't want to. That distinction matters, because it reframes everything. This isn't a fall from grace. It's a conscious withdrawal, a boundary drawn after a lifetime of having too few. And then there's the memoir, In Pieces. That wasn't just a book. That was a detonation. Every secret, every buried moment, every carefully hidden scar, put into words. Not polished, not softened, just there. A final act of control. Because for once, she gets to tell the story on her terms. Not as a character, not as a headline, but as herself. And maybe that's the real ending here. Not tragedy, not triumph, just truth. Messy, uncomfortable, long overdue truth. And maybe the most haunting part of all, she survived everything the world never saw, and still somehow convinced everyone she was fine. And that's the part that lingers. Sally Field didn't just survive Hollywood. She survived a life that kept rewriting the script against her. The smiles, the awards, the roles, they were real. But so was everything she hid to earn them. And now that the truth is out, it hits different. Because this wasn't just a career, it was a cost. Like, subscribe and stay tuned. Because behind every icon, there's always a story they almost didn't tell.